Hey, I'm Zeb,
And I'm Maddie.
and welcome to the We Don't Know Yet podcast. Whilst both Maddie and I are healthcare practitioners, we understand that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to healthcare. Should you require any medical attention, please seek out your local healthcare practitioner.
We're back.
We're back.
Episode 2.
Yep,
Woo! Thanks for listening, guys, if you're still part of this journey.
yep. And really quickly, we have to address my hiccup. I'm working really, really, really hard and overthinking so hard every word that I say in this podcast.
All the suppose.
So that I don't say suppose.
If you've seen on our socials, you'll know exactly what we're talking about.
Dude, it was so bad. So, like, obviously, this is our first
Proper.
crack at this.
Yeah, exactly.
And I listened back all the audio straight off the rip,
Yeah.
and it was horrifying. I cringed internally.
Oh,
Just listening to my own voice was like,
it's
oh,
always
no.
the way, though.
I know. There's never an easy way to, I suppose, go about it. You just got to learn on the fly.
There
oh,
it
no,
goes again.
there it is.
And I feel like if you have a word that you say, like yours is suppose or suppose, I feel like when I've done podcasts like in the past for work, I've always said, bye Tegan. Sorry, it's Seb's housemate Tegan. She's off to
Hi,
work.
Tegan.
And when I've done podcasts for work in the past, my word's always absolutely. So I listen back and I say absolutely like 10 times
Yeah.
and cringing like,
Yeah.
oh my God.
Yeah. So don't hate me if
He just
I've
is really
pointed it
fond.
out now and you see it.
Yeah, I feel like now that you've made it aware to our listeners, they're not going to be able to unhear it.
I know.
Every
So
time
I've
you
got to
say
work.
suppose.
It's good though because I've got to work really, really hard now
Just
to
rock
not
it.
say it.
Just rock it. Just own it. It's your word.
Maybe I will just wear it. Maybe it'll just be
Just
like
wear
a
it.
common trend.
Yeah.
We'll see if Kenny and the guys can get a suppose counter every week. See if I can break my record.
If
No.
you have any alternatives to the word suppose, hit us up.
Yeah.
We'll integrate it into our language.
Yeah, I'll try and make that my new word.
Oh, how are you? How was your
Good.
weekend?
Yeah, busy.
Busy.
I saw you yesterday.
We did. We saw it. We got each other. Well, we caught up with each other, I should say, for a little photo session.
Yeah.
I don't know what to call it.
We had an awesome day. Zane came out and did us an absolute solid.
Yeah.
And took a few flicks.
I know, very good. You'll see them, sure, soon on the socials.
Yeah, which was cool. But we tried to get a little setup going out here, similar to kind of what we have. And it was hard.
Yeah, it was. It was
It was
actually
really hard. Yeah.
Afternoon starting hitting as well. Like
I
that
learned
3
a
PM
lot
sun.
about lighting.
I know.
Zane he spat some knowledge at me and I was like, I can see that now. Like even this morning when we were, doing
know.
some prep stuff, we had the light coming over the back and I was like, oh,
Set up, I
don't
know.
I
To
don't
be
know.
fair, like we record this podcast in Zeb's backyard, and I
Yeah.
think we've done pretty well.
Yeah,
it
I
looks
like
good.
it. It's nice and aesthetic.
It
hey?
is. God forbid when a plane fly over. That's fine.
That's
it's
okay. That's all right.
We
We'll let it
digress.
happen. How was your weekend though? You had a busy one.
I had a busy one. I really feel like the timing of the topic of today's podcast, I feel like, a living, breathing, walking contradiction to the whole podcast of today, because clearly I sound congested and burnt out. Surprise, surprise, that's the topic of today's podcast.
But relevant, right? Like I feel like everyone goes through this journey when they're in
Exactly.
our industry. So,
Exactly. But no, it was a good weekend, just lots of socials. But God, I'm really keen for a quiet weekend this weekend.
yeah. Well, you don't have too many quiet weekends coming out because of the fact that you're running a marathon in 2 weeks.
I am.
At the time of recording.
At the time of recording, it's T minus something or other days until a marathon, which I'm not keen for.
What's your longest run so far?
What was it? 32 Ks. And let me tell you, my knees paid for it. They let me know that they were in pain.
Yep.
Oh, and you're doing the 10K?
Yeah, just the 10K for me. Nice
Exciting.
little trot this year.
Yeah,
which
but I
should be
feel like
good.
you say just the 10K and then you absolutely send it and do a cracking
Yeah.
time.
Well, I feel when you get there on the day, the adrenaline, everyone's
too
so
hyped.
excited. You get to the start line, you hear that start gun go off, and you just go,
Yeah, absolutely.
run as fast as you can.
And you almost don't know like where you've had this power in you the whole time.
Yeah.
So it's crazy.
I remember Dan Wags was talking about like redlining as hard as you can at like the summer series
Oh,
over at URC, and I never thought I'd experience it like I did
yeah.
when we actually ran the summer series. Like you have someone chasing you from behind and you're trying to chase someone in front of you, and it's just
Seriously.
like
For those listening that have no idea what the hell we're talking about, Zeb and I met when we were like a part of a run club.
I actually
underground run
feel
club.
like last podcast we didn't actually make mention to how we actually cross paths.
No,
at all.
I don't think we did. So we might have to touch on that.
We might have to do that today or in a later podcast.
Yeah.
Actually, go back to the beginning.
Yeah, the timeline. But yeah, so Zeb and I both run for a run club, Underground Run Club Sydney, or URC as it's so called. And every summer they do something called the Summer Series, where basically for 4 weeks in a row, every weekend you would just absolutely send it and put yourself to near cardiac arrest. But
Run
it's
as
fun.
fast as you can. I remember seeing the first photos that Dan teased out on the URC page.
Yeah.
And they were from last year's. And there's photos of just like Dan Atkinson, like
Oh,
head in hands, and like Bridget head in hands,
It's
like
horrendous.
gas lying on the floor at the end of the run, just like,
Yeah.
oh no.
it's actually really fun. It's cool to be a part of that where everyone's just like pushing themselves to the absolute max.
Unreal.
We'd like to take a break from today's episode to give a quick shout out to our sponsors, Drip Digital. They manage all of our audio and video editing as well as our social media marketing. Without them, the We Don't Know Yet podcast wouldn't be possible. So thank you again.
In regards to, I suppose, your calendar then, I just did it again. Suppose. In regards to your calendar,
Yeah.
you've obviously got the running in the background. You've got work, which is pretty busy for you at the minute.
It is.
You're in the process of something very
Very exciting.
behind the scenes, something very exciting.
Oh, actually, I feel like by the time this potty comes
True,
out,
actually,
yeah.
You will have had your rebranding stuff all come out,
Yeah,
which is
so I'm
pretty cool.
rebranding at the moment. So
Yeah, I was like,
no,
oh my
I know.
God, I was about to lead into it and just expose it entirely. But no, yeah, at the time that this comes out, it will have all been
done.
done,
Yep.
which is cool, but a very busy time for you
Super hectic.
there.
Yeah.
And then, everything else you've had going on. You've been away,
Queensland.
Queensland.
Yep. Hence the congestion.
Yeah.
Burning the candle at both ends, everybody, and
Yeah.
that's really not ideal. So
Yeah.
I feel like I need to learn a thing or two about what we're talking about today.
Well, yeah, I think it'd be nice to strip it all back for you and just go through it bit by bit.
100%.
And we have
A run sheet.
a run sheet
We're
today. 'cause
organised, we're
last week
organised.
was really hard not to say suppose.
I know.
And
because
actually
we'll
keep to a
making
bit
it-
of a run sheet because we were
100%.
trying to just
we were pulling it
talk
out
on
of
the
our
fly.
arse.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. But we looked it up and like this is a very normal thing.
Yeah.
Like a lot of podcasts have
We've done
run
our
sheets.
market research, everybody. People
yeah.
have run sheets.
Yeah, but the conversation today about normalizing, I suppose.
I was waiting for it. I was waiting for you to say
I'm just gonna have to get Kenny to
just own
cut
it.
all of these out.
Just own it.
Normalizing burnout in the healthcare industry.
Yes.
Because it is a really big
Super
thing.
prevalent. Yeah.
It's huge.
100%.
Um,
So if you're listening today, maybe you yourself are feeling a bit burnt out or you have in the past, you're in the right place. Or you just want to prevent it because it is something that is really, really common in our industry, as Zeb just said.
mm.
Mm.
And I think to start that, like we probably go all the way back to where you and I have both kind of come from the last year or so.
Yep.
That transition from
Uni,
uni into private practice.
the joys.
Yeah, and just the fear of not feeling like you know everything.
Yeah.
And this is kind of that trying to open that door to that conversation and the fact that it's actually okay to
Not
be learning.
know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
on the go. Like we know a lot about our industry. We have to know a lot to go into this space, but at the same time, it's super normal to get into the industry and feel like
We're
you
human
just
beings.
have no idea. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
And like, honestly, that really inspired the name for our podcast as well because we're like, we are just taking it day by day. We're winging it.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're making informed, educated decisions.
Yeah.
But we're not encyclopedias. We're just people.
We're not computers. We don't,
Yes.
we store as much as we can.
Yeah. Do people even use encyclopedias anymore?
I don't know,
think so.
but that's a cool word.
Yeah, sounds sophisticated.
Yeah. But I feel like there is a lot of pressure on healthcare practitioners in our space to really, be these walking dictionaries of health
100%.
conditions and
Knowing absolutely everything about health
someone
under the
comes
sun.
in for the very first time, you haven't seen them before, you go through your examination or your assessment or your questionnaires with them.
Yeah.
And their immediate expectation is for you to know exactly what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's a lot of pressure to hold. Like
Mm.
I feel like if you hold on to that and you I suppose
Like embody it almost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you take that as kind of what it's meant to be like moving forward,
Yeah.
and that you're meant to know everything
Yeah.
each time someone comes in,
It's terrifying.
it's just a huge weight to bear on your
100%.
shoulders.
Yeah. So I suppose we're up there. I go.
Oh, nice one!
Ah!
Hey, they say you start saying the words that
I
the
know.
people that you hang around with.
Oh,
You know,
I definitely do. Well, today we're going to talk about, obviously, as Zeb said, like the expectations of healthcare practitioners to know absolutely everything and anything. And like we are obviously here to say that that's absolute bullshit and we're not a part of that or fans of that.
Yeah.
But what are the implications, I suppose, Zeb, of having that pressure or that burden on you all the time?
Yeah. Well, I feel like there's a lot like we've just briefly looked into what it does to our industry, what it does to the mental health of healthcare practitioners. So we'll talk a little bit about that today. But I think really important before we even get started, just to break down what we're actually defining as burnout.
Yeah.
And I suppose
Just own it. You got to own it now.
I reckon, like we looked at what the WHO kind of classifies.
Yeah. World Health
burnout
Organization, everybody. Who?
Yeah. Just in case you don't know. I feel like everyone knows who the WHO is
Everyone
after COVID though.
Who the who? Yeah.
Who's the WHO?
Who's the who?
But yeah, it's essentially chronic workplace stress that has not been managed well or successfully.
And the article that you read broke it down really nicely, didn't it?
Yeah. I loved the article. Shout out to Wynne, physio.
Hopefully he's listening.
Yeah, one of my
podcast.
mates who I used to work with in Melbourne. He wrote a really good article on burnout, which he propped on up on LinkedIn. We might even put it in the show notes for
we'll
today,
pop it in the show notes.
just so you guys can have a quick read through and see what it's like from the perspective of a physical therapist. But he broke it down into 3 different categories.
Yep.
Looking at the work factors that influence burnout, the workplace factors, so your actual workplace environment and setting, and then some external factors as well outside of work.
Okay.
And I thought that was a really cool way of breaking down what actually contributes to burnout a little bit.
Oh, definitely.
But maybe let's reel off like some of the typical things you see in terms of signs and symptoms of when, healthcare practitioners, or some signs and symptoms you've experienced yourself when you're going through what you would classify as a little bit of burnout.
Yeah. And I feel like personally, I'm so late to the party with registering when I'm not feeling great, whether or not it's burnout or something else. But I feel like the earlier signs of burnout would be things like feeling really drained and fatigued, maybe just like lacking motivation, even just getting repeat illnesses. I say as I'm congested AF. Feeling dissatisfied in what you do, just feeling like, starting to having that like existential crisis almost. It's like, am I happy in my job? Am I fulfilled? Like, am I liking what I'm doing? Am I making an impact? Really just having that self-doubt and like questioning, everything pretty much.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you can think of?
I reckon like a lot of the stuff that I feel, like I've always been a very involved person, very social person, trying to be involved in a lot of things outside of work.
Yes.
And I feel in the last year and a half, I've found myself pulling back a little bit on weekends, or,
It's
there
hard,
might be
though.
little social gatherings during the week. And I think that's a really big sign that you're starting to kind of feel the effects of a little bit of burnout.
Yes.
Mainly just because, your body's trying to recover from all the social stress that it's had throughout the week.
Yeah. And I suppose with that, there I go again. And we're not saying like making a conscious choice not to do things on the weekend to sort of preserve your mental and physical health. But it's like, if you are typically someone that likes socializing like yourself, Seb, and you're noticing that you're less inclined to do that, then that's a bit of a red flag.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah. And then the other things being, even at work, a little bit of an impact on performance, or feeling like you're not really getting patients to the stage that you want to be getting them.
Yeah.
And whether that's just your own perception of the situation, or whether that's a little bit of burnout having a little bit of an influence on that as
I
well.
feel like as well, like I'm quite a caring person and get quite emotionally involved with my clients, which is great. But I think when I was going through my own little burnout phase, I noticed I stopped caring as much. And I don't mean like, this obviously sounds horrible saying it out loud, but again, the point of today's topic was not so much not providing good care to your clients or patients, but more so it's kind of, you're just like, oh, whatever happens, happens. Like, I'm just like, I'm less involved emotionally in it.
Yeah. And it's really tricky because you almost need, again, like being just transparent with it, you almost need that ability to leave all of your work at work.
Exactly.
Like, it needs to be, you can't get too emotionally attached to those scenarios, because if you do, that's when you start to take stuff home and it starts to impact you.
Exactly. There's a fine line.
It is such a tricky fine line.
It's so freaking hard.
But going back to kind of some of the contributors, so being able to piece some stuff together.
Yep.
Looking at those three kind of areas that we were talking about a second ago. Talk us through what do you think, or just from what we've kind of looked at, what do you think some workplace contributors are, like some environmental contributors are to kind of burnout?
Yeah, I feel like low job satisfaction, I should say, would be a massive one. Like that lack of reward in what you're doing. If you're not feeling like you're enjoying what you're doing or not seeing results or getting value out of your job, then that's obviously going to be a one-way street to burnout pretty soon.
Yeah.
Like fewer supports or not having as many support networks to lean on.
And so like you work within your practice as one of the only dietitians at the practice as well, right?
Yeah.
So working... And I'd be really interested to get your take on this, because I work in a practice where I've got a lot of osteos around me. I can bounce ideas off them and things like that.
Yeah.
What do you? How do you manage that scenario in terms of a support structure? Have you got stuff in place so that you can lean on someone or a mentor or someone like that? Or?
Yeah. So just for the listeners, I rent a room out of a physiotherapist's office. I am the only dietitian. We also have a massage therapist and a psychologist, but they typically work on days that I'm not there. I feel like I've lucked out in the practice that I work at because they're all absolute legends. And although I work for myself, I do feel like part of a multidisciplinary team.
Yeah.
With that being said, obviously they're not dietitians. They probably can't offer the support and advice sometimes that I would need to sort of bounce off on client cases, that sort of thing. So what I have done is I've set up a monthly mentor, a monthly supervisor, a monthly group supervision, and I just have like a lot of friends that I sort of bounce things off, like colleagues. Yeah,
unreal. So and then obviously as well, being in that multidisciplinary setting, you also have the opportunity then to voice a lot of these concerns or bounce some ideas around with other practitioners in the practice too, hey?
Yeah. And I feel like one thing that's helped me is I've outsourced all my administration tasks, like booking, emails, payments, to the physio managers. Yeah. That's included in my rent, which again, I've been super lucky to get. I know not everyone has that opportunity. But I feel like that in of itself has allowed me to kind of just step back and not have to deal with all the like sort of arduous tasks, I suppose, that come with running a business in terms of the booking fronts, like people cancelling and that sort of stuff. Yeah. And at the start of me working, I did do all of that myself. And then I noticed that I was getting very caught up if people cancelled. The type of person I am, I'm like, oh no, it's me. I've done something wrong, even though I definitely hadn't. Yeah. Maybe I have, who knows. But since sort of outsourcing that, I feel like I'm getting a lot less emotionally involved, but in a positive regard. Yeah.
Huge. And then the other one that I find really interesting in terms of workplace environments is like a conflict in values. So like obviously then talking to a lot of practitioners around you, you're going to get a lot of different perspectives on how to manage the situation. One of the trickiest things feel like I've faced is getting advice from other colleagues in my network or in my industry that doesn't really resonate with me, or I don't personally agree with. And again, that's not to say that they're wrong in terms of the way that they're looking at that scenario, but we all have a different way of managing these things. So I find like, it's all good to have the support networks there, but then to have the values conflicting a little bit can be really tricky as well, because that can make you feel like you have the support, but at the same time, you almost also feel like you don't have the support because you
Yeah.
don't agree with how, they're going about managing or what advice they've actually given you. So
Absolutely.
so tricky.
And with something as nuanced as health, like you're going to ask 10 people, you're going to get 10 different answers.
Yeah.
Like no one's going to have, or it's very rare that people are going to have the exact same answer.
Absolutely. And like maybe if you speak to every student that's sitting in OSCE at the end of their osteo degree, or every dietitian that's
Did you do OSCEs too?
Yeah.
I did OSCEs.
Yeah. So even if every dietitian that's coming out, they're going to have like
So
a bit of a cookie
things.
cutter approach to how
Exactly.
they manage and what they're looking at.
Yes.
But within about a week of real life,
Yeah. It doesn't
it'll
work.
be like a 180.
Yeah.
Yeah. It'll be like a 180.
Someone telling you to go get when you're giving them advice that they don't like.
Yeah. So to break away now from more that environment, talk us through, or let's talk a little bit more about, I suppose, how the work role can contribute to burnout.
Okay.
What have you noticed in a sense of things that contribute to your burnout from being a dietitian in itself?
That's a really good one. I feel like this year, I'm in my second year at the moment, I've definitely kind of landed on my own 2 feet a little bit more. But last year, I was heaps burnt out. Obviously, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that soon. But I think, again, coming back to that conflicting sort of in morals and values, like I was seeing people and helping them for weight loss, and like, not that there's anything wrong with that, but that's just not my jam. So when I was helping people with that, I'm like, supporting them dietetically with that, I was like, this just doesn't fill my cup. This feels really wrong. And I think that really contributed to my burnout. Was that your question or not really?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I think so. And then also, like looking at your actual role as a dietitian, there's so many different things that you have to factor in. You've got to factor in time to do all your admin. You've got to factor in time to actually go through and research different cases. And, if someone's not responding to something very well, you've got to pivot on the spot and find something else and be flexible and try and provide them with an alternate management strategy.
Yeah.
How do you go about managing some of that stuff? Because I feel like all of that in terms of having the time in one's week to actually do that.
A bit cooked, Yeah. Last year, because obviously first year of business, I was like, oh shit, money's tight. Finances are a bit, not fast and free.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a saying, but I've just made that up anyway.
We're going to roll
with
it.
It's fine. We're going to roll with it. So I definitely felt that financial insecurity last year, which is why I definitely overbooked myself. So I was doing notes and stuff at ridiculous hours of the night, on the weekend, getting up at 4 a.m. just to do stuff like that, which is horrendous and obviously a really fast way to burn yourself out. This year, however, I have recently integrated time blocking into my calendar. So I block out certain chunks of time for those, tasks like GP letters, notes, finances, invoices, yada, 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 which does mean on the whole, I do have less client facing hours. But I've also kind of come to the point where I'm like, okay, well, at least that's allowing me to serve my clients in the times that I am available a whole lot better, because I'm not thinking about the other shit that I have to do. Like I'm there, I'm present, I'm really in it, I want to help them. Obviously, I've always wanted to help them, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's been helpful in that regard. And while financially it's obviously a little bit less, it's kind of worth it in my opinion. I'm like, it's a few $100 a week. It's not the end of the world.
Yeah, and it's so hard, isn't it? Because I feel like you come out of uni, you've been working I worked as a receptionist for a few years, and I did some little stints as a sport trainer, and you kind of get caught up in that idea that you're now in the workplace, you need to push, earn, and it's a bit of a negative loop at the end of the day, because you just, it's like eat, sleep, work, repeat.
Yeah.
And you struggle to, I
Very
think, fit everything in. Yeah. It does. And it contributes, I think, very early on in your career. I mean, that's why there's so many studies that are coming out about the dropout rates of allied healthcare practitioners the moment they enter the workplace. That first 5 years being a real crucial phase in someone's career.
It
essentially.
is, honestly. And like, it's not to say that you don't have to hustle, but just got to be smart about it.
Yeah.
Like, there's absolutely no point running yourself to the ground because you're going to be forced to take time off whether or not you want to.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
And, you know, having that autonomy and that independence is such a blessing as an allied healthcare practitioner. When you lose that a little bit, I feel like it can be a little bit tricky in a sense that, like you said, you know, you're just trying to cram everything into the time that you've had set to facing clients instead of being able to be a little bit flexible and work in some admin blocks and stuff like that. I think a lot of workplaces these days are really up to date with that and they're, you know, happy to accommodate for that. It's just more about, I suppose, the healthcare. I suppose, I said it again, double up. The healthcare practitioner actually knowing that they're burnt out a little bit.
Exactly.
That they're feeling that effect of being busy.
Exactly. And only stopping when you absolutely collapse.
Yeah.
One of my favorite quotes, and it's honestly something that I have to remind myself all the time, just the type of person I am. I'm like, go, go, go. But it's like, you got to slow down to speed up. So I always have that in the back of my mind when I have that kind of guilt of not doing all the things that I should be doing or knowing that I could have, you know, filled this hour seeing a client when, you know, really in real life, I need to just rest and chill the F out.
Yeah. Huge.
So time blocking's been good. Sundays are now like a non-negotiable, non-work day.
Unless we're doing some photo shoots.
Unless we're doing photo shoots or podcasts. But honestly, that's fun. And like, we're mates. Obviously, I'm friends with your partner, Gabs, as well. So it's kind of like hang out with friends anyway.
Yeah, true.
What about you? What do you do?
That's a great question. I don't know. I think I've tried to really block out time where I'm doing admin. I'm a bit like you in a sense that I feel like I'm a bit of an emotional empathic person.
Yeah.
So I find it really hard to separate myself from work. Like if I'm at home on a Monday when I've got a day off like today, I'll have my emails in the background. And if I get an email from a patient, it'll just like sit there and muster at me all day.
Oh, it's horrible.
Which is it's so hard.
Yeah.
But I've really tried to separate myself from that and be like, right, I'll answer emails within work hours. A lot of my admin stuff still probably gets done outside of work hours, which is just how it is.
It's a work in
It's done at home.
progress.
It is. But I think it's really important to have some stuff on the outside that you can work on too. So like this for me is something that just takes away from that hustle and bustle of work and it's a time where I can just kind of unwind and relax and do something that's a little bit different.
It's kind of like therapy in a way.
Yeah, it is a little bit. Talking it all out,
Yeah.
venting it all out.
I'm very pro therapy for anyone listening.
Yeah.
No, that's great. And it's even like I brought up with a client the other day the different types of health. So like your mental, physical, social, spiritual, emotional, I think it's the other one. Yeah. So it's kind of like looking at that as well. Like physically and mentally, I think everyone focuses on that. And that's obviously super important, but it's your social health too. So if you're like cutting off seeing friends or really closing off the times that you have available in the week to do that social stuff just to do more of like the work stuff, then it's kind of, it's not great.
Absolutely. And then relating this to even if you're not an allied health practitioner, right? You know, we have patients that come in all the time and I listen to them talk about their schedules and their weeks and not being able to separate themselves away from work. And it really does contribute to their health as well. Yeah. Their overall health, like it would contribute to our health.
It does.
You know, they come in, their body's sore, they're feeling fatigued, they're tired. Yeah. You know, they've been unwell. Like it starts to relate a lot across the fields.
Even just that chronic stress and the effects on the body, which I feel like we should do a podcast episode on.
Yeah, I think that would be a good one to do.
Which I know very little about, but what I do know is how, like, the things that I do know I should say about, it's pretty wicked, the effects that it can have.
Agreed. Cool. Well, having that knowledge now, how does that influence our industry? Because we've already touched on it a little bit in a sense of talking about dropout and stuff like that. Yeah. I think it also has a little bit more of an influence on the fact that, you know, the uptake of our industry can come into question in later years in terms of people being a little bit concerned about getting into a healthcare industry if they've had a bad experience with someone who's been a healthcare practitioner who's then dropped out because they hated the workplace.
And maybe they didn't have they were a bit of an asshole to them or whatever.
Yeah. And then they, that person, flow on effect, doesn't ever want to be a healthcare practitioner. It's like X'd off their list of careers they might like to try.
Yeah.
But then also looking at the stress that a lot of that dropout puts on the current
healthcare
system
is
huge, I think.
Well, I think I was telling you the other day, I went to a conference the other weekend up in Queensland, the ANZ AED. Had to think about the acronym then. The Australian New Zealand Academy of Eating Disorders, I think. Conference. Anyway, long story short, they were talking about, like, exactly as you said, the current demands on the healthcare system. And at the moment, the demand for psychologists outweighs the current capacity.
Yeah.
Which kind of begs the question. It's like, well, if we're in the healthcare industry, knowing how constrained it is at the moment, and we're also not doing anything to support our health, are we just going to be putting more pressure on it already?
Yeah. It's this horrible loop that just goes around in circles, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So I think, really important to address some of this stuff because of the fact that it contributes to,
if we don't take care of ourselves, we're not doing not only ourselves a disservice and our clients, but also the healthcare system as a whole.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It is a lot.
So I suppose where do we go from here? What can our lovely listeners sort of take away, I guess?
I think takeaways from today is just opening the door to reaching out if you are experiencing some sort of burnout. It doesn't even have to be a severe form of burnout.
Yeah.
But just talking it out with another colleague.
Yeah.
Even if you
having those support systems in place, even if it's not in like a therapeutic space, like having a mate or a family member that you can just chat to,
talk with about it,
or even not necessarily talk, just do something with to take your mind off things.
Yeah.
And you go.
And like how we've spoken a little bit about your, approach to managing some scenarios at work, trying to fill the plate with some other things that are really wholesome and contribute positively to your health as well. So, trying to make sure you're doing some social activities, find some other hobbies outside of work.
Exactly.
Things like that. The other side of that being, I think, making sure that you're continuing to try and further yourself in the industry and learn more.
Yes.
Be more capable.
But then off the back of that as well, like it's okay to not know everything.
Yeah.
And even having those conversations with clients.
Absolutely. And I think that's the whole discussion here is, we don't know everything.
Yeah. Hence the name.
And that's not to say you're never going to know everything.
Yeah.
It's just, you might never know everything.
Yeah.
But it's not to say that you won't get to a stage where you'll know
more confident.
More. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
and that's the whole idea of our space. It's why a lot of our organisations have required learning each year.
Exactly. How many hours do you have to do a year?
25.
25.
Yeah.
I think we're 17 off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Yeah,
crazy.
right. Still a lot, but honestly, it does add up really quickly.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about you when you came out of uni and you first started working in private practice, but I had this weird guilt sort of thing about not knowing everything. But now I've kind of learned, like, no one minds if you just tell them, oh, I'm not really sure about that question. I'm going to do some research and get back to you. Like I've said that so many times in this year alone, and I've never been met with like a bad response. People kind of almost value it. They're like, oh, she's going to take extra time out of her day and unpaid hours to support me and to sort of, gather the evidence to help me here, which is awesome.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah. And to add to that, there's stuff that comes through the door that isn't textbook,
Yes.
No one's the same.
No one's the same.
No matter how many research articles you read, no matter how many textbooks you sift through.
Yeah.
Not one person is the same.
Yeah.
So presentations are going to vary all the time.
Exactly.
Which means that, yes, you might see something that you have just never in your wildest dreams seen.
100%.
And that's okay.
It's a learning experience.
Yeah, it's a learning, exactly. It's a learning experience. The patient's not going to take offense.
No.
And at the end of the day, there's going to be no negative outcomes. It's part of that process of getting to know the person that you're dealing with.
Yeah.
And then that in itself sets up a bit of a pathway for actually managing them really effectively.
Absolutely. And like, I think it would have been a few months ago now, I was talking to my psychologist just about that weird guilt thing about not knowing everything. He's also kind of a mentor of sorts in terms of business stuff. And he gave me statistics, and I'm going to paraphrase this because I actually don't know the exact statistics. But basically, it was like some article that sort of summarized the patient-client relationship, patient-practitioner relationship, I should say. And it was like 50% of that relationship is based on rapport.
Yeah.
So we kind of, I should say, feel that pressure to know all of the things. But if you're not bonding with that client and if you're not gelling with them, they don't care how much you know.
Yeah.
They just want to be able to feel like they can like trust you and connect with you and feel supported by you.
Yeah. And off the back of that as well, everyone's personality is different.
Exactly.
You know, like some people might not connect off the go.
Yeah.
You know, it might take a couple of appointments for them to actually settle in and feel like,
Yeah.
you know, things are going the way that they want them to go.
Exactly.
But at the same time, it's important not to think too hard about the fact that if someone comes into your room and your personalities don't meet in the middle,
Yeah.
you know, if they go off and see someone else, or if they just don't resonate with your approach, that's fine as well. Like you're not going to be able to satisfy 100% of people that you see.
You can be the ripest peach in the world and people are still not going to like peaches.
Yep.
There's going to be somebody that doesn't like peaches.
Love that.
Completely butchered that quote.
Love that analogy.
Yeah.
Love that. No.
But it's true.
Yeah.
I say that to my clients all the time. I'm like, look, practitioners are like shoes. Like if you're not feeling like we're the right fit, that's okay. Just being open and honest about that as well, I think is quite nice. And like, I don't feel that pressure to have to make this work. Obviously,
agreed.
It's nice if you get along with somebody, but the likelihood of getting along with everybody is not possible.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah. Well, I think that covers
definitely think
a lot of things that we were hoping to get across today.
Yeah.
You know, key take homes being
it's okay
burnout's
to not know
okay.
everything.
Yeah. Yeah. And make sure you have some good strategies in place to manage burnout. And it comes in a lot of different forms, not just from a work role, not just from a work environment, but you know, how old you are, how long you've been in the industry for.
Exactly. I feel like to some extent, I don't know if this is the right way to say it, but it's kind of inevitable in at least some form. But if you can put the supports and systems in place from day dot, you know, it's going to be minimized.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Whether or not it's full-blown burnout or just like feeling really exhausted.
Yeah. Which we all sometimes go through anyway. Hey?
Exactly.
Life's stressful.
Life is stressful. Oh, thanks for listening, everybody.
Yeah,
Hope you
thanks,
enjoyed
guys.
the potty.
I feel like we got through a good amount, and I didn't say suppose, except for that time where I doubled up and said suppose twice. But yeah, we'll see you guys next time. Thanks for listening to this week's podcast.
Be the first to know when the next episode drops by hitting subscribe on wherever you catch your podcasts.
And don't forget to follow us on Instagram at wedon'tknowyet.pod.
See ya.